Alright guys, welcome back to another video. It's been quite some time since we last looked at the Kickstarter project, but today we finally received these 3 boxes here. Well, technically they're from Indiegogo, but that's pretty much the same thing in pink, so I guess it still counts. And anyways, as you can see on the boxes here, they're from Atari. And in there should be our unit of their new console, the Atari VCS. The Indigogo campaign ended in summer 2018 and they managed to raise over 2.5 million euros from over 11,000 backers. What they promised in their own words was a completely modern gaming and video computer system blending the best of consoles, PCs and streaming to delight a whole new generation of gamers and creators. Now, in less marketing speech, this is what the new Atari VCS should be like. It should run a Linux-based OS, it should run new and classic Atari games, it should be able to stream Netflix and co at 4K 60 and have support for streaming games from the cloud. There should be interfaces like USB, HDMI, Wi-Fi, Ethernet, Bluetooth and also compatibility with controllers, mice and keyboard. There should be a PC mode to load existing PC games and play AAA indie games. Now, if you're used to PC gaming, that feature list doesn't sound all that special, does it? That's basically just a regular PC running Linux with some pre-installed software on it, right? Yeah, that's basically what it is, and it's not a bad idea. It really depends how they realized it. And one more thing to add. The release was initially planned for the second quarter of 2019. Well, given that we're filming this review now in January 2021, yeah, that didn't work out that great. But first off, what actually led Atari doing an Indiegogo campaign? Aren't they a really big and established games company? Well, yes, they used to be. Atari started off all the way back in 1972, and back then they were really one of the pioneers in the video game space and really pushed the industry forward. You may heard of Pong. Yep, that was Atari. Now moving forward to 1977, and Atari released its first home video game console, the Atari Video Computer System, VCS. Sounds familiar? It was later renamed the Atari 2600 and became one of the most successful consoles in history. Now, if we compare the image on the box that we got here with the design of the original Atari 2600, you might see some additional similarities. And that's intended, as the whole design is based off that legendary console from 1977. Random fun fact, the early games for the original 2600 were stored on cartridges, like this one. And they had a total capacity of just 2 kilobytes, and they even put multiple games on some of them. Talking about memory efficiency, right? We have really come a long way in the last 40 years. Well, those were the good old days most people probably associate with Atari. But in this form, Atari only actually existed until 1984. Now, since Atari as a brand has quite a turbulent history behind it, including some changes of ownership and even bankruptcy, we will skip all of that as it would be too much to cover for this video. You can read it up if you're interested. We just wanted to make one thing clear. When we're talking about Atari today, we're not really talking about the same Atari that brought us all those great innovations and games back in the day. It's basically just the name and the brand that survived. Just visit their website if you need any more confirmation for that. Besides regular games and apps, they apparently now plan to also open an online casino. Heck, they even created their own cryptocurrency, the Atari token, which, you guessed it, will be usable in their casino. And in case you haven't seen it, they're also planning on building hotels. So I don't know what they're focusing on nowadays, but it seems to be like everything. But enough of the history part. Let's finally get back to this box here, open it up and see what we got here. Alright, so let's put these two aside and start with the main event here, the actual console. First thing, you have to give it to them, the packaging does look really nice and it feels really good and solid. It's also pretty cool, like the little Space Invader game or what it is called. Yeah, that's the console itself. And we also got some little cool Atari VCS 800 Collector's Edition certificate. Yeah, that's pretty nice from the Indiegogo campaign. Here we do have our console. It's pretty light, I must say. Also, this is plastic. From the images, I would have imagined it would be something like metal to help with passive cooling, but I guess this will do. Also, build quality is nice. If you have a look at the front here, we do have this wooden textured feeling, which is unique to the collector's edition we bought. We do have 2 USB ports in the front, which would be for the controllers. And if we turn this thing around, you can see 2 additional USB ports in the back, an HDMI port, an Ethernet jack, and of course the power jack. And we also have an additional nice little sticker for our collector's edition. We have 5,000 something from 6,000 units that were produced. Alright, then let's bring back our accessories box that we put aside. Inside here we got our HDMI cable, which makes sense. We do have our power brick and the adapter. That looks like to be a US plug. Well, problem solved. Alright, so let's have a look at the 2 controllers we got here. Let's start with the wireless modern controller. The packaging is pretty much the same as on the console. And yes, it's Asteroid, not Space Invaders. And here we got the controller itself. That does look like a pretty ordinary Xbox controller. Key mapping is the same. We got that little nice Atari red accent. That's the USB charging cable. It's not USB-C though, it's still micro USB, which is a little sad. Let's move on to the wireless classic joystick controller. It's actually bigger than I would have imagined. Looks just like the classic Atari controller, but in a more modern style, and also the nice red accent. Okay, let's set all of this up and let's play some games. Well, that animation ending was underwhelming, to say the least. To be fair, we already created an account because that took some time to set up, so let's hop right into it. So we're at our home screen here, but let's hop straight over to our games. As you can see, at the moment there's only the Vault here, so I'm gonna go to the store to see what else is available. And as you can see, there are a few games available ranging from, I don't know, $5 to like 25. Not that much though. Here we do have our Atari Vault that was promised and we already own. But there's an additional Vault. It's like an extension pack with additional games. And apparently we do have to buy this. Which is, given the price that we paid for the whole console and package, yeah, it should have been included. Alright, so let's fire up the Atari Vault, which is the collection with, I don't know, about 100 classic games. That's kind of a long intro. I actually switched over to the classic controller for this because it just fits the theme. So we do have a lot of old games available, but I guess we'll just hop into a round of Pong because everyone should know that. Well, as you can see, I'm not really used to using this controller and playing Pong at all. Yeah, enough of seeing me fail. We could also try a round of Asteroids, because that's what actually was on the package of the Atari. Ugh. But I'm not really better at this game either. What you can actually see in the game is if the classic controller, the LED lights that they added. So you can really see in which direction you're pointing, which is kind of nice. Let's switch over to the classic controller once again, because it's just easier to navigate the menus with this. So let's see what this thing has to offer in terms of apps and multimedia. Yeah, we do have the majority of the streaming services are there, but once again, it's like, I don't know, 15 apps, 10 apps, not a lot. Let's just install Netflix, I guess. Well, that's just a Netflix page, like in a browser window. As you can see, you can't navigate or do anything with the controller. Right, since we were stuck using the controller, we now switched ourselves over to good old keyboard and mouse. as you can see, is really just the webpage of Netflix loaded in a borderless browser window. Given how all of those multimedia apps are rated, I guess it's pretty much the same for all of them. So calling this an app is, yeah, pretty far stretch. So using this thing as a multimedia center or anything, yeah, no. So back at the home screen here, what we also do have is the PC mode, which would actually allow you to, as you can see, which would allow you to install an operating system like, I don't know, Linux or Windows and boot into that. But honestly, we're not gonna bother doing that because it's not that strong of a console to play recent games anyways. And for everything else, we're using our PC. Now let's actually switch over to 4K because that's what the TV supports, and also the Atari is labeled as 4K capable, which will actually causes the console to reboot, which is, yeah, haven't seen that in a while. Alright, so we're back, and you probably can't hear it, but the fans of the console are spinning up like crazy. As you can see, it's pretty slow already, but if you want to just buy a game, first of all it takes forever. And then it opens this little form to put in our credit card information, and as you can see, it's lagging like crazy, so not really usable. Now let's talk a bit about the hardware inside this thing and how it actually compares to other consoles. We're not going to open it up though, as we already know the specs and there's already lots of other videos out there if you're interested in the details. Just briefly. The Atari VCS runs on an AMD Ryzen embedded R1606G processor. That's a low power chip based on the first generation Ceen architecture with only 2 cores and 4 threads. There's no dedicated GPU in there at all, but it uses the integrated Radeon Vega 3 graphics. Now in general that wouldn't be a bad thing, but that chip just isn't very powerful, and so in terms of real raw performance we're looking at not really that much, to be honest. And depending on the model, we're looking at 4 or 8 GB of RAM, which at least is upgradable though. Our unit here is the 8 GB model, by the way. But just to give you guys some rough context of the performance in terms of raw teraflops compared to other consoles. This thing, the Atari VCS, comes in at 0.46 teraflops, while the last gen PlayStation 4 was already at 1.8 and the current PlayStation 5 is over 10. So I guess those numbers speak for themselves. From a hardware perspective, this really is just a regular small PC, but certainly not one of the more powerful ones. Now, if we take a look at the game library of the Atari VCS, then yes, it does come with the Atari Vault, but that exact same Vault can be bought on Steam for just 10 euros and it's on there since 2016. So this is nothing exclusive and really runs on pretty much any PC. Nothing you would need this box for. There also aren't any real exclusives or anything that you really couldn't get elsewhere. And in terms of using this thing as a media center similar to the PlayStation or Xbox, well, we've seen the state the Netflix app is in, so no. And if we consider potential future developer support and game releases, well, based on Atari's own numbers, they pre-sold around 15,000 VCS consoles. Compared to Xbox, PlayStation or even Nintendo, that number is tiny. So there's no real incentive for developers to port their games to Atari, let alone develop specifically for it. Alright, let's sum things up. Visually, the Atari VCS looks really nice. They really nailed that mix of classic 2600 design with modern elements. Also the controllers are both gorgeous with those little red accents on them. And you can use them on your regular PC as well, which is nice. But in terms of blending the best of consoles, PC and streaming like they advertised, well, they did blend it, yes, but definitely not to the best of it. After all, the Atari VCS is a small PC running Linux with some sort of console-like skin on top of it. But that console aspect doesn't really work well. Yes, you can play the classic games and that's nice, but that's about it. There aren't really that many other games, apps or services available, and Chrome and Netflix are not even usable at all unless you connect a keyboard or mouse. And if you're going to install Ubuntu or Windows 10 on it to make use of their PC mode, I mean, it's definitely nice that it's possible, but at that point you might as well just get yourself a PC instead. especially since the Atari VCS isn't capable of properly playing recent AAA games anyways. And all of those retro classic games are available on Steam, so you won't miss out on them either. So we're kinda left with a hybrid device that technically can be used as both console or full-fledged PC. But besides the retro gaming aspect, it doesn't really work well at all as a console, and to be really usable as a PC, the processor just doesn't cut it in terms of performance. So should you get one then? Well, if you only wanted a nice looking console to play those old Atari classics, then yes, the VCS may indeed appeal to you. But the current price tag of $399 is pretty steep for just a retro console. If you wanted to use it as a media center or even PC to also play recent games, well, you're probably better off getting an Xbox, PlayStation, or just building yourself a small HD PC. So, what's your opinion? Tell us down below if you think that Atari succeeded with the new Atari VCS. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing for more content like this. And see you guys next time!